Hello, BookTube. Welcome to Two If by Sea, March 2019. This is an ongoing project with Steve Donahue's channel and my own, where we discuss nautical books. And we alternate. So if he's doing fiction, I do nonfiction, and vice versa. And this month, he's doing fiction. I don't know what yet. I'll have to watch his channel. And I'm doing nonfiction, and I'm filming this a little early because the third Thursday is when we try to do this of each month, and of course I have meetings. So you may wonder at the jaunty cap. Well, it's in honor of our author, Donald Hamilton, who is famous as the author of the Matt Helm thrillers that were very, very popular at one time. And there he is in his jaunty cap with a sextant. Right there. And this book came out in 1980, and there's a wonderful picture of him on the cover. the 27-foot Vancouver cruiser that he has built, he names after his wife, Kathleen, and then in several legs of the journey, either she's present, or the various voyages, or his son Gordon is. Mr. Hamilton was a novelist, but he started life, his nautical life anyway, in Annapolis, Maryland, and sailing Chesapeake Bay. The story over the years has been that, he spent his life on power boats after initially the sailboats in Chesapeake Bay, and he worked as a novelist. I think he had like 7 of his novels became movies. The character Matt Helm was a runaway success, sort of a dark, violent figure. And then with the fuel crisis and stuff in the 70s, he decides to go back to sailing. Now, he's an older gentleman, about my age I am now, at the time this takes place. And he sells off his powerboats, concerned about fuel prices and environment and all that, and does the research, orders a Vancouver, as in British Columbia, 27-foot cruising boat, sailboat. And he reworks his, reworks isn't the right word, he reacquaints himself with the sea in a way that you don't really get with a powerboat that's peculiar to sailboats. And throughout you see him working on his navigation with the sextant and stuff. Back then, of course, there was no GPS. When I read this when it first came out in 1980. And I pulled it off the shelf for this project I have with Steve. And it's as good as I remember. Now, obviously, as a novelist, he knows how to write. Or as a successful novelist, he knows how to write. And this is a good piece of nonfiction. He talks about the struggles. So this boat is very solid. It's built as a cruiser, not as a... here's another wonderful picture of him. I'll probably pop that up there. So like I say, my jaunty cap isn't as jaunty as his. I actually like his. But let's see, I think it's on page 16 here. Yeah, you'll have some drawings. If you look at under the waterline, you see it's very, very solid. It's not really sharp like you'd see this shape almost with a racing sailor. The prop is protected if you go aground, and the rudder is protected. So he wants a solid cruising boat. So it's not as fast as a sailboat. Most of the time, this thing's not going to get over 5 knots. And it's very seaworthy, and it's very forgiving. And he talks about some things that he prepared for to make sure it was a seaworthy, not too large portholes, making sure that, it was watertight where it needed to be watertight. First leg, the nice thing about this is I've sailed a lot of these waters. I've been to Vancouver. He goes down through on the test run down to Seattle to register the boat as an American boat. I've sailed all those waters down to Cape Flattery and Nia Bay and up and down the whole coast of Washington. And so I'm familiar with a lot of what he's talking about in this leg. And here it described is there's one section where he talks about where they're up in that part of the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia and all that. One of the things you watch for is deadheads. There's logs everywhere and tow barges towing logs and the cables be real long. You might think there's a towboat over here and not know they're towing something and hit the cable. There's things you learn to watch for. One of the things is deadheads, and that's a waterlogged log. Really, it's just tips. It's pointed up. Well, I was running boats there once, and it took a propeller right off my boat. So they're insidious. But he discusses all these things and the fears. Okay, now I'm going out. So he goes out Puget Sound, past Cape Flattery. You go out and you take a left. But you go way out, and then you do it, and it's empty. Compared to other areas of the world with shipping, I mean, you can go days or weeks without seeing anything. But marine life and all that, and if you're first time out doing something like that, it can be a bit trying. You second guess yourself. And he talks about how they made their way, trying to make landing and testing his navigation, storms, heaving to, and just waiting for the storm to go away. And that part of the book is very, very interesting. His son Gordon's with him. So the boat gets tested. Then another section where he has a boat. He thinks about going through the Panama Canal from LA, but instead he has the boat trailered, which is probably a wise decision. Depending on your experience and how much time you got and all that, it's quite a journey. So he has it delivered to Houston. He talks about doing the Gulf side of the Intercoastal Waterway, running into problems in New Orleans because he's not a working craft, and some of the folks that were running the locks thought only working craft should go through, although that's not true. And that's when that solid, although deep draft for some of that work, comes into play and bounces off some mud, which most of us have ridden, worked with boats down there have done. And then he has sort of the open run on the Gulf of Mexico on the Gulf side down through places where I've been in boats for years, and that would be down near Naples, Florida, Marco Island, running out to the Keys, and so and he's learning the whole time. He's relearning, but also learning, and you can see how he soaks up information from books. He's a novelist. He does a lot from books, but also from experienced characters he meets along the way. And then just hard research, and so it must have been a great sort of like a contrast to his novel writing in a way, and yet uses some of the same skills. We have the story of him making his way into. He went with a huge flotilla back in the late 70s. They got permission to all go at once. Sort of a run of sailboats and then a run of powerboats to Cuba. And I've been to Cuba. And how exciting that was, and his sights there. And he talks a little about Hemingway and all that sort of thing. And then We have him working his way up the coast to Marathon, Florida, and then Miami. His adventures sailing to the Bahamas, dealing with the Gulf Stream. He talks about one time doing research for a novel and being on a big, not a very large crude carrier, but a smaller version that ran oil, a tanker that ran oil from Venezuela to Florida, back and forth, and the crew, and how he had to research that. So he took his perspectives as a yachtsman with this big wall of steel, what you would always be worried about, and then of course the professional mariner's concerns about yachtsman behavior. So there's all these discussions, and he ties them all together, and a lot of it's about his personal growth. The Cuba part was really interesting. The getting out to the Bahamas, interacting with folks was very interesting. So even though these are sporadic legs of voyages that are connected in the lifetime of the boat and himself, he, with his novelist skills, is able to weave it into a single overarching tale. At the end, he has some appendices. One of them's on nautical bookshelf. He does stuff on self-steering gear. He makes a big thing that, you got to get offshore if you want to cruise. You got to get out of sight of land, and that's absolutely true. I've been months without seeing that. You've got to be willing to run the boat at night. You can sometimes get yourself in more trouble trying to get into a harbor in a hurry because it's getting dark than you ever would if you just sailed on to your destination and sailed at night. It's fine. And then, of course, you have to be able to go through a storm or two, and you have to go alone. In a cruising boat of that size, there's a certain time when your crew has to leave, or you can't get anybody to go, or somebody comes up sick, and you should be comfortable sailing alone. And he understands the safety aspects, and he has a big digression about international single-handed sailing races and that sort of thing, and the ethics of it. So even if you have never sailed or operated boats or anything like that, this is a well-told story, and a lot of it he doesn't expect you to understand the nuances, but he'll tell you and talk about it. So you pick up quite a bit. And I thought it was very well done. I'm glad I have it on my bookshelves. I don't know how easy it is to find. Sort of makes me want to go find an old Matt Helm paperback somewhere. Maybe I'll keep on the lookout for one. I haven't read one in ages. And so I would recommend it if you can find it, and if boats are your thing, a foreshore thing. And then if they're not, and a well-told story or adventure, I think you might enjoy it. So next month on 2If by Sea, I will be doing a fiction wrap-up or review, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Steve does this month. And thank you very much, BookTube.